So the big question is this: how are those in the self-storage industry like us going to be successful in today's market? That's the question, and this show will give you the answers. My name is Jim Ross, and welcome to the Self-Storage Show.
Hi everyone, this is Jim Ross with the Self-Storage Show. Today's going to be a fun one. Got a great guest with me today. I'm going to read this because it's a long one. Got Sean Delaney here with me, Senior Vice President of Investments with Delaney Self-Storage Group, part of Marcus and Millichap. I got it all down. How's it going, Sean?
Good, Jim. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking the time and being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was kind of telling you before, I do a lot of operations and management and marketing for all the sites and all that. And over the years, I always tell people a lot about, building value in your properties and how you can do it. But I saw I think you had an article on LinkedIn or something like that. It's talking about building value for properties as far as like the broker's perspective.
Sure.
All right, we got to talk about that. So before we get into that, just kind of tell us a little about yourself, your group, what you got going on, and then we'll kind of get into the rest of everything else.
Yeah. So we're the Delaney Self-Storage Group. We work with Marcus and Millichap. We're based in Chicago. I started working with Marcus back in 2003. Always been focused on self-storage and just slowly growing the team over the years. So we've got myself and four other gentlemen. So we really don't consider ourselves brokers. We consider ourselves advisors.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll touch on that in a little while, but we work primarily in the Midwest. We've done some work in other parts of the country, but we spend our days trying to help and advise and add value to self-storage owners.
Oh, that's great. It's so many times I'm talking with owners, and we're just talking about a lot of times, at least when they're contacting me, they kind of have an exit plan. They know where they want to sell eventually, that kind of thing. We start talking about, well, okay, where are you at and how do you want to get there? And we start kind of building that plan and building value and everything. And it's amazing some of the things that you can just do and implement, just the crazy effect it can have on the value of a property. So I'd love to get your perspective on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's we're not on the operation side, so we're not experts on the day-to-day operations, but we evaluate hundreds of properties a year, from the institutional size properties down to the smaller, 20,000 square foot, 25,000 square foot kind of quote unquote mom and pop sites. So we have a pretty good understanding of, what the revenue side looks like, and certainly on the expense side. So, we do the same thing. We look at an owner's P&L and, try and help them if there's an expense issue. Primarily we see, insurance that's out of whack, or we just talked to an owner yesterday and I looked at his numbers and what he was paying on his merchant credit cards. And from the numbers I saw, he was paying like 7.5%.
Ooh.
If we can get him down more into what the market is, that'll save him on an annual basis $2,000 to $3,000 a year, and on a smaller site, that'll add $50,000, $75,000 to his value. And that's just one expense line.
Break that down for me real quick for people that are listening to this and watching this. Again, those little things like you just talked about, a couple grand a month that you can possibly be saving. Okay, and then you say now that's building value of 75 grand. How does that work? Where does that value come from? Well,
so some of that is obviously depending on when his exit is.
Sure.
But right now, what he was paying on his merchant credit card fees versus if he was paying, what kind of the market rate I think is probably in the 2%, 1.75, 2% range.
Yeah.
That would save him annually a couple $1,000s or more that he, just drops to the bottom line, drops to his NOI.
Yep.
So that makes his cash flow better. And that was just one line item. So he's not ready to sell today. But at some point in the future, that increased NOI is going to add value, assuming cap rates stay where they're at. If cap rates move, if the market moves, obviously values adjust.
Yep.
But again, that's just one line item. So we typically see on some of the smaller sites, the mom and pop operators, maybe a little less sophisticated, don't pay attention to their expenses. That's where we can help add value pretty quickly, because they can change their insurance, they can change, merchant credit card processors. So we can add value, even if they're not selling right now, we can add, cash flow to their bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just funny. You kind of have to get that mindset of value, not just here's a dollar amount, what I'm, saving or what I'm making more each month, but putting that, hypothetical cap rate on it. I know it fluctuates and kind of depending on where you're at in the areas, but just having that value mindset
Right.
makes a huge difference. I talk to owners all the time, and I love my owners, and sometimes they're cheapskates. That's just how it goes. Sometimes we go through the P&Ls and just I have those kind of conversations too.
Right.
Well, what's this and what's that? We start kind of just asking the right questions as when you're kind of going through your P&Ls, and it's amazing how much you can start saving. And it's not just about penny pinching. It's about expenses. Make sure that you can get the same service for the less money. Great.
Right.
Kind of on the flip side, as far as like bringing in more and getting more revenue, what have you guys seen on as far as getting that going?
Yeah. So, I mean, if an owner wants us to evaluate, their property and provide them, a price, an evaluation.
Yeah.
We look at, obviously we look at their P&Ls and what their revenue is, but then, we dive into the market and maybe they don't keep track of the rates of the competitors. So, we dive in and try and get an understanding of where street rates are at, try and get an understanding of what the other properties are actually achieving, not just what their website says, but what they're actually achieving. And then we can provide them a little more insight into the market and how they stack up against the competition. And in a lot of cases, some of the smaller owners that we deal with, they don't pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't raised rates. It's not uncommon for us to hear an owner say, I haven't raised rates in 5 years.
Yep.
So
it makes me break out, and I'm just thinking of that. I know.
Yeah. So depending on, and some of the owners we deal with, they've got a full-time job and the storage site is not a hobby, but it's just an investment and they're not paying attention to it on a daily basis. So we can add value, right there. They can implement some rate increases. They've got tenants that have been in there for 5 years and, they're 10, 15, 20% below market. So that's an immediate, boost to their NOI.
Yeah. And again, like I said, it's not just having that, okay, now we're getting more better street rates, we're raising from our current customers. That's great. But when you slap on that, like cap rate and that value, that's insane. I look at it sometimes. I just had this conversation with somebody not too long ago, and I do like it's 30-minute consultation type deals. And we sat down like about 30 minutes. I realized it was about $2,000 a month you're leaving on the table, and this was just revenue. We weren't looking at anything else, just revenue. And we slapped like a 7 cap rate on it and looked at it. I'm like, well, there's $400,000. He's like, well, wait, what? So we kind of reverse engineered how it works, and it was like you can see, the head kind of going crazy. I'm like, yeah, that's the power of what we're talking about.
Yeah, every dollar to the NOI adds value.
Oh, it's insane what it can happen. I'm curious, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but as far as like when an owner wants to sell their property, for when they're making these changes, like we're talking about, where you're cutting expenses and looking at your credit card fees and the raising your rates, that kind of thing, does it have to be implemented and kind of have a history for length of time before that can be taken into account and say like this is the true generation of revenue to take into account?
Yeah, there's many instances where, like in a market today where I think we still have a lot of runway left.
Yeah.
If an owner can implement better expenses, if they can make those adjustments, and then obviously, increase their street rates, move up some of their tenant rates, hold it for 6 months, because I don't think the market's going to move, in the next 6 months or 9 months. I think we still have a lot of runway left. It also depends on what, they want to do. What's their motivation? If they're not in a hurry to sell, hold it. Why leave money on the table if we still have runway?
Sure.
So it's really, but in many instances, we advised our owner or potential client, now is not the right time to sell. Hold it, implement some changes, make those adjustments, grow your NOI, and you'll put more money in your pocket, 6, 9, 12 months down the road.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you don't have to have that short-term perspective, have that long-term perspective and make those changes now.
Right.
It's more money in your pocket immediately. So yeah, why not do that?
So that's kind of a double-edged sword too, because if they implement all those changes, and then, they see the results, then, they can, start to and they get their current, tenants up to street rates, and they push their street rates up to market, and they make expense adjustments. Now when the next guy comes along, what's left? How much meat's left on the bone? Is there any value add? How do they make money? So it's sometimes a double-edged sword. It's a fine line.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about it that way. I'm so used to being on the owner's side, and trying to get them as much money as possible. I didn't really think about it from the buyer's perspective.
Right.
That's true. I got to think about that one. Interesting. So anyway, as far as for you guys in your group, how are you, like people reaching out to you and they just say, okay, I want to sell? Kind of walk me through a little bit of that, how it works when they work with your company.
Yeah, we've certainly had more inbound phone calls, people wondering, what's my property worth? Should I consider selling now?
Sure.
Obviously, storage has weathered this storm very well, probably better than some expected, going into the health crisis and then the financial crisis, and people were worried from the onset. And I don't think any of those issues really came to fruition as far as delinquencies and move outs and lack of move-ins. So, it's weathered the storm really well. And, people are taking notice, certainly from the buyer side, and sellers, an owner, they're experiencing, very good operations and strong NOIs, and there's lots of capital flowing into the market, and debt is still historically pretty cheap. So now's a good time to be in the market if you're a seller. So yeah, we're doing more evaluations today, probably than we ever have, and getting more inbound phone calls with people wanting to know what their property is worth, rather than us proactively calling and seeing if we can help with any issues or what their plans are.
Yeah, I was curious about that, because I've heard that from a few people going, if you would have asked us this 9 months ago, it would have been like, oh, you're a little wary, a little scary, but
yep.
Oh my gosh, we're at the end of the year right now, and it's like they're looking back like, this is the best year we've had.
Yep.
It's even from from an operations and from managing sites and looking at their P&L all the time. It's the best year we ever had, and I would have lost that bet 10 times over. At the beginning of the year, I was just like, I was a nervous wreck. But it just shows you the power of this investment. It's just, it stays steady or it's always going up. It's crazy. I don't know what else can really, how many more hits we can take to see if it's going to have a negative effect, because I don't know. It's pretty resilient. It's amazing.
Very resilient.
So yeah, I mean, again, as people are listening to this, again, I always try to have as much valued education as possible, but I would love people just to take away of, when's the last time you pulled a P&L and honestly just sat down and looked at the line items and just been asking yourself those questions? What can we do to maximize? What can we do to be more efficient?
Right.
And this is a whole nother conversation, but there's so much more technology that's out there right now, and there's just a lot of systems in place that will help people with that dramatically.
Right.
You see some people that have been around mom and pops. I mean, I love my mom and pop. That's my bread and butter. But sometimes it's like a time warp. You look at their stuff, it's like the same thing that they had 15 years ago. They
Right.
haven't made any changes or haven't really gone through and looked at the revenue, and you're talking about that one guy that hasn't had a rate increase in like 5 years. It happens. I know we kind of shake our heads because we're in it every single day. Like, what are you doing? Just come on, take a look at it.
We sold a 2-property portfolio in Illinois. I won't say the city that was in, but the owner at the time when we sold it, his mantra, if you will, was, "I will never raise your rates." Yeah.
Yeah.
So we deal with the gamut of, the operators like that who just want to run a unit and, kind of set it and forget it and not worry about revenue management.
Yep.
And then we work with the sophisticated people who are implementing, very strategic revenue management systems.
Oh, I always have my comeback for that, because I hear that all the time. My comeback is always, well, you're in this business and you're obviously a great businessman. You got in the storage business, right? Oh yeah, it's a great business. I'm like, well, what do you have against money? I'm like, what? It kind of makes it bad for a second. I'm like, well, what do you have against money? And I'll do that quick breakdown of just, a little bit of value, how much value can be brought in from revenue increases. And sometimes it's just a matter of, they're my customers. They're my customers. I'm not going to be like those other guys. It's like us versus them kind of a thing. And I don't know, part of it I kind of get sometimes, it's their customers and all of that. And they want to take care of them, but at the same time, this is a business, and there's so much tools at our disposal of what we can do to kind of turn different levers and things to really optimize the revenue for our facilities. So,
Right.
Hoping to have this kind of a conversation. I just want to spur people, as they're listening to this and watching these sessions of, just sit down, and go through it. And sometimes, I don't know if you guys do this, but if they can just maybe call, maybe, bounce some ideas off to you guys and talk it through sometimes, and you can start seeing some of the value that they're being on the table, because it's talking to somebody else, it is so much better than just kind of being in your own bubble and trying to solve your own problems.
Right. Yeah. We have owners call us all the time asking about expense issues, expense questions.
Yeah.
They call me and say, can I raise my rents 5%? Can I raise my rents 10%? Am I going to lose that many customers? And what happens if I do? So that's a concern. So the majority of the evaluations, that we do on an annual basis don't necessarily turn into a listing for us to sell. It's more of a value that we provide to the owner. Some people, we do it twice a year. We put them on like a strategic analysis, and they want to see what their site's worth, a couple times a year, maybe more depending on what's going on in the market, but just a snapshot of, what's the property worth. It could be a partnership issue, could be a divorce, could be whatever, just an update on what the property is worth. So, that's just what we do. And again, it's more of an advisory capacity than it is, a broker with my broker hat on calling somebody saying, do you want to sell?
Yeah.
How can we add value to your world?
No, I love that. That's a great distinction, in a advisory. That's perfect. So let's end on that. So people that want to get more information, and hope this has sparked some interest in it as far as realizing it's time to kind of, if nothing else, kind of see where they're at right now, having that kind of benchmark and seeing what their value of their property is. Sure. And you can have a consultation, see where you want to get to, and kind of build that plan. So that's fantastic.
Sure.
If you've ever been listening to this and want to move forward, how do they get a hold of you?
My office number is 630-570-2267. Email is sean.delaney@marcusmillichap.com. They can find us on Facebook and LinkedIn, Delaney Storage Group.
Perfect. And I'll make sure for everyone that's listening to this on all the video channels and that, we'll make sure we have all the links to everything as well, so they can easily get a hold of you and then take the next step.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Thanks so much for taking the time, Sean. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Bye.
Take care.
Hi everyone, this is Jim again. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to visit 3milestorage.com for more free resources on how to grow your self-storage business. See you on the next episode.